Hi, I'm Casey Fatchett for The Nerdy Photographer, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to read a photo histogram. Now, one of the best things about digital photography is the instantaneous feedback that it gives to photographers. You take a photo and you see immediately if you got the shot. The problem is when you go back in post-production and you're looking at it and go like, oh, maybe this shot was overexposed, like part of the details and the highlights were blown out, or it's so dark in parts of it that you can't recover from the shadows. Well, looking at your photo histogram and knowing how to read it can give you a lot of input as to how your exposure in your photo is. So, what is a histogram? Well, it's a graphic representation of the exposure of your photo, and it represents the entire tonal range. So you have on the horizontal axis, it's your tonal range from black, which is all the way over on the left, and that's where all your shadows are. And then to white, which is all the way on the right, and that's all where your highlights in that area and that range over here. And then in the middle, you have all of your midtones. And then on the vertical axis, up and down, you have the number of pixels at each point in that range. So what you're looking at is where, how many pixels are at each one of those points along your tonal range. So let's take a look at a few different histograms and what they mean. First, we're going to start out with underexposed. As you can see, this graph, this histogram is pushed all the way over to the left into the shadows, all the way to the black point. This particular photo, this exposure, is going to be very hard to recover in post-production because when you start to brighten that up in post, you're going to get a lot of grain and noise in that image because you're not going to be able to recover that information from the shadows. The best way to correct an image like this would be to use a wider aperture, use a slower shutter speed, or increase your ISO setting. Exposed to the left, which means ETTL. ETTL, not to be confused with the ETTL feature on your flash. This is exposed to the left, which means you can see from the graph it's pushed closer to the left, but you still have some space there over towards the black point, which means that you have more information in all of those shadow areas. This can be, you can make some slight adjustments to aperture, ISO, or shutter speed to bring this more into the midtones range. But this might be normal if you're shooting in a very dark conditions and you have a lot of elements in the dark. Next we have kind of the histogram that a lot of people aim for. This is a neutral exposure. You can see almost all of the information is here in the mid-tone range. You don't have any clipping at either the shadows or the highlight area of this exposure. And this is the exposure that is going to be the most easy to work with in post-production. You can get the most out of it either way with recovering highlights or shadows in post-production. Exposed to the right, or ETTR. This is a technique some photographers use to avoid having grain or noise in their photos, is to slightly overexpose slightly the image, or this might be a light and airy photographer. This might be what your histogram is going to look like. You've got your histogram is pushed more to the right and with much more data over towards the highlighted area of the photo. Overexposed. This image is overexposed. As you can see, the histogram is pushed all the way over to the right, all the way to the white point, and all this data is in the on the right-hand side of the histogram. Now, this photo is going to be very difficult to recover information from there in post-production. When you try to bring the exposure down in those areas, what you're going to end up having is white blown-out areas or even grayish areas where you try to recover the highlights. The best way to recover or to get a better exposure, if this is what you're getting in your histogram, is to use a narrower aperture, increase your shutter speed, or lower your ISO settings to push that exposure further down towards the midtones. And remember, different exposures, different scenarios, different scenes, different things you're trying to capture are going to lead to different histograms. It's not like a lot of people say, like, oh, listen, you want to get a neutral exposure every time. That's not absolutely the case. For example, if you are a dark and moody photographer, you're going to have more exposed to the left histograms. You're going to have more information that's over there in the dark side of your exposure. You're going to have more things that are in the shade, in the shadows area. Or, for example, I have a black dog that loves to run around in the snow. I have a lot of like blown out white areas of those photos that are because I'm trying to expose for my dog who's very dark. So I get great pictures of her. I'm not concerned about the snow. But there's that large swaths of that photo and that exposure are going to be blown out, and that's okay. It depends on what you're trying to do. What's most important here is that you understand what you're visually looking at in your histogram so you can understand how it affects your exposure and what it means about the photos that you've taken. Did you enjoy this video? I hope so. And if you did, please smash that like button and subscribe and leave a comment and tell me what else you would like to hear about so I can prepare for videos in the future. And until next time, stay safe and stay nerdy.